April 7th, 2026. We are in the 5th year and on day 43 since the start of the full-scale invasion. Welcome to the Situation Report. In today's report, we will look at attacks on Russian infrastructure, as well as on the Black Sea Fleet's replacement port and further territorial gains, or rather, some indications of territorial gains that will probably only be fully confirmed in the next few hours. As we know, the Russian offensive is still ongoing at the moment. You don't hear much, neither from the Ukrainian nor the Russian side. At the same time, there are 2 or 3 local offensives on the Ukrainian side about which we also don't hear much. But I try to make the best possible use of the information we get so that we have a fairly good picture of the situation here. But let's start with something else. First of all, thank you very much to those of you who reported the fake Telegram channel. As you know, there's someone here who is trying to lure people into a crypto group under my name, of course, to offer them some shady investment opportunities. Of course, that's fraud, and they're using my name and also my channel's logo. So if you haven't done so yet, please feel free to report this Telegram channel. This lets Telegram resolve the problem faster. In the Russian city of Rostov in the Voronezh region, a chemical plant caught fire. Footage shows a large fire inside the facility, accompanied by heavy smoke. The affected facility is a plant that produces, among other things, ammonia, nitric acid, ammonium nitrate, and many other substances. These substances are not only relevant for the civilian industry, but they also form key base components for the production of explosives. Explosives that, for example, are used in Russian Buran-2 drones or perhaps in almost every other type of ammunition, which they urgently need in the war against Ukraine. So this is not just a simple industrial plant, but of course part of the chemical industrial base that plays a role both for the economy and for potentially military processes. How severe the damage actually is currently unclear. But what will be crucial is whether only individual production areas are affected or whether larger parts of the plant fail, just like with any refinery. You almost know this already. It's a standard phrase that I can always add, because often there are alternative lines that can still be used for production. If essential, hard-to-replace elements fail, overall capacity will be affected for everyone.
Gewissen Zeitraum heruntergefahren.
Of course, that has a strong impact because there isn't a chemical plant in every city that supplies materials for the military process. What you're seeing here isn't hellfire, but the port of Novorossiysk. Do you still remember Novorossiysk? Well, you know, and we can take a look at it on the map. We are here roughly where the Black Sea Fleet is, or rather where the Black Sea Fleet headquarters is, in the city of Sevastopol, in occupied Crimea. Right here at this spot. And if we zoom out here, as we know, they've been attacked very often in the past, often by Storm Shadow cruise missiles, just like the surrounding airfields here. These blue pins, those were also attacks on airfields that I marked here back then. And due to the losses of the Black Sea Fleet, that's also one of the reasons why I now jokingly call it the Black Sea-less Fleet headquarters here. The Russians have relocated them. Namely here, a bit further to the east, here to Novorossiysk at this location, and down here also to Tuapse. These are the 2 ports that now house parts of the Black Sea Fleet. And Novorossiysk has repeatedly become the target of several airstrikes. Back then, that was still quite useful for the Russians, and also made sense since Novorossiysk was not within the range of Ukrainian cruise missiles, or especially not within the range of Ukrainian drones. But now, that's already the case. That means back then, it was logical for the Russians to move their part of the Black Sea Fleet there. It was more or less almost untouchable. But now, it keeps getting attacked. And we can see that here as well because the port is on fire. It fell victim to an airstrike. Footage shows several separate fires within the port area, which indicates hits on different targets. At the same time, Russian air defense remains active, but it has not managed to intercept all targets. Novorossiysk is one of the main Russian ports on the Black Sea. Accordingly, a mix of civilian and militarily relevant industry is concentrated there. Several sources of fire within such an area are always problematic because they don't remain isolated, but can quickly spread to adjacent structures, especially at a time when the Russian fire department is already suffering from a lack of equipment. Which specific facilities are affected has not yet been clearly determined. If I find out anything new about it, I will of course send it to you. We're staying on site for now. On the night of April 6th, there was apparently another targeted attack in the port area. According to current reports, a Russian frigate was damaged in the process. Admiral Grigorovich class hit in the harbor. Possibly the Admiral Makarov or the Admiral Essen. According to reports, Ukrainian FP-1 and FP-2 drones were used. Both systems have recently been used in attacks on infrastructure and now also appear to be specifically used against maritime targets. The affected ship class is important for Russia's operations. Equipped with Kaliber cruise missiles as well as anti-aircraft missiles, it represents one of the central platforms for attacks from the Black Sea. And in almost every air raid that we see every night in Ukraine, whenever cruise missiles are involved, they are often launched from ships of the Black Sea Fleet. A hit, even if the ship was not completely put out of action, can at least temporarily limit its operational capability. At the same time, the offshore platform Sivash was also hit. Such facilities serve not only economic purposes, but of course also for reconnaissance, surveillance, and as forward positions, which are also used militarily by the Russian side. So there are many indications that the maritime area as a whole is once again coming under pressure, not just individual units, but also the entire infrastructure relevant for operations in the Black Sea. In recent days, we've repeatedly talked about Ukrainian FP-2 drones, and again today. And here you can actually see one in action. Footage shows how one of these drones hits an alleged Russian military hangar, clearly damaging or even destroying the building. This fits with recent developments. The FP-2 has recently been used not only against individual tactical targets, but also in attacks on refinery depots, and now even on ships. It is no longer a niche system that we only occasionally see or hear about, but now appears regularly in different operational roles. What stands out here is that the drone seems to be comparatively flexible in its use, and above all, available in larger numbers. That's exactly what makes it interesting. Not as a single high-end system, but as a tool that can be used repeatedly and widely. And that's exactly the combination you see here. A clearly identified target, a direct hit, and an effect that is decisive for a single system. Even Russian sources like Riba now admit that control over Novoyakovlivka has been lost. According to them, the area is currently stable and under Ukrainian control. It's important to note, of course, that Riba is a Russian and Kremlin-affiliated source. So for us, this is a Russian report about Ukrainian gains. Apparently, Pavlivka is also no longer considered secure. The background here is less about a single breakthrough and more about a gradual weakening of Russian positions. Ukrainian forces have apparently managed to massively disrupt the supply of Russian units deployed there, especially in the area of drones. That's a point that is apparently very often underestimated, because when units lose their drone capabilities, or those capabilities are severely limited, they not only lack reconnaissance, but also a central means of conducting combat. And reconnaissance itself is no longer carried out by long-range scouts or anything like that, but mainly by drones on the Russian side. Movements become riskier, reactions slower, and their own line becomes much more vulnerable. And that's exactly how the situation seems to have developed here. It wasn't a single blow, but rather the loss of capabilities that led to positions could no longer be held in the end. And if we look at the whole thing on the map, these are roughly the directions of attack on the Ukrainian side. Here, the Ukrainians are said to be roughly along the line, that is, the line between the gray zone and the Russian-controlled area. And they're also attacking through this district. At the same time, there are fights up here in the north of Stepnohorsk. And when the Ukrainians have captured this area, then they will see, and I can guarantee them this already, that they will continue to soften up the area here toward the southwest and southeast. At the same time, they will try to defend the city here against Russian counterattacks, which will mainly come from the 1,455th Motorized Rifle Regiment. What advantage does that have? Well, it's quite simple. You can see here there's a huge body of water running through. So we have this old Russian reservoir here. And the thing is, the Russians obviously can't bypass this. At the same time, the Ukrainians are increasing the pressure up here and are forcing the Russians to stay in their positions. That means they can hardly evade, except of course by retreating. And here, over Stepnohorsk, that's a key position because we can also see here in the east there's an attack from the Ukrainian side. They are located somewhere here in the yellow marked area. That means if they capture this place here and then can move in this direction, they have a relatively short way to the body of water and can then encircle an entire Russian regiment here. At the same time, they can also close off here and claim and control the rest of this zone for themselves. That means via two fairly short routes, it would be possible to shift the front significantly. We can also take a look at how big the whole area is, because I see there is currently no scale displayed. Now it looks much better. So you can see for yourself from the village. I'll just take the center of the village to the body of water. It's about 0.3 kilometers. And in the other direction, it's about the same, also 0.3. That means if they manage to take the village here, then they have a very good starting position, which they can defend quite well. And on the other hand, from there, they can also use the existing infrastructure, like the roads, for example, to get to the body of water relatively quickly and easily, or even to adjacent units here that are trying to catch up and close the gap. As I said, this whole area up here would more or less fall into Ukrainian hands, while the Russians are being pushed back to positions that aren't even that advantageous anymore because we see Plavny here. That's where they will most likely retreat to, but it's rather sparsely populated. At the same time, things look a bit worse down here towards Kamyansky. The more urban and easier to hold positions are only found again in this area here. And this place here has actually always been contested over the past few years, so it has more or less belonged to both sides because both of them have been present there, which will of course be very interesting for the future. But a bit further to the east, the situation looks a bit different, because here on the Ukrainian side, the situation is much more serious. The 125th is particularly affected. Assault Regiment, which is currently under pressure near Mern. New geodata suggests that Russian units, probably parts of the 38th Motorized Rifle Brigade, has broken through in the Mern area, marked here. In the process, a tactically important hill northwest of the village was almost captured, specifically Hill 136, which is where the front line currently runs. This point is not only a terrain advantage, but also directly affects control of the surrounding maneuver areas. As a result, a Ukrainian battle group consisting of elements of the 154th Brigade, as well as elements of the 61st Brigade, has been operationally encircled. The forces had already been gradually withdrawing since mid-March. I meant, of course, they withdrew after another important terrain point had previously been lost. The withdrawal was carried out as a delaying action under constant pressure, and now also seems to have reached its limits. The situation is also very tense in the immediate area around Mern itself. Part of the territorial defense that was deployed there has apparently also gotten into a difficult position. To stabilize the situation, additional forces were brought in, including an assault unit with a special composition, which is now being deployed here behind their own lines and is carrying out counterattacks on the lost high ground. At the same time, the situation on the left flank of the sector is worsening. North of the Ulej-Pilsky-Ulej-Pol road, the Ukrainian blocking position is once again coming under pressure. Russian forces continue their attacks from there and are trying to break through the lines near the assault formation. The defending Ukrainian units are quite exhausted after weeks of deployment and can no longer repel the attacks on their own. In response, reserves were sent to the area, including an assault battalion that is currently carrying out counterattacks to push the Russian forces back from the embankment along the railway line. So the overall picture shows a front that was held here for a long time, but is now visibly coming under heavy strain. The Ukrainian forces deployed are indeed numerous, but they consist of heavily strained units, some of them only recently assembled. This naturally increases the complexity of command significantly, so it's very clear that it's not just the sheer number of battalions that matters, but of course their condition. This condition now appears to be a key factor in this sector, making future developments interesting to watch. Thanks to all subscribers, channel members, and the Algo crew. Special thanks to Lieutenant Colonel Renneke, Feria Meyerhofer, and everyone for the subscriptions, likes, and comments. See you in the next daily report.